Shout out to everybody out there from Rhode Island to the world. Club Ambition Podcast, back again with a special exclusive segment conversation for this podcast week. I'm Victor, the host of Club Ambition Podcast. Victor Baez every single week. We got co-host Noel in the building right here for this special segment right here. And without further ado, let's get to our guest. We have a special guest in the building. Round of applause. Welcome to the studio, David Morales in the building.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for having me. Again, very, very excited to finally be on the Club Ambition Podcast, y'all.
I know it was going to happen, in due time, naturally it's happening, and the timing is a significant timing. Tell the people who you are and what your job title is for those who don't know out there.
Absolutely. So my name is David Morales, and for the last 5 years, I have served as state representative in the city of Providence for our Mount Pleasant, Valley, and Elmhurst neighborhoods, where I've been fighting for the needs of working people.
And were you born in Providence?
I was born in Soledad, California, which is a small
nice.
rural town in the Central Valley.
Okay.
It's home to about 20,000 people and predominantly Mexican immigrants coming to the U.S. and working in the agricultural fields.
Oh, nice. At what age did you come to Providence with your family?
19.
19.
So I grew up in a single immigrant household with my mom and my older sister.
Wow.
They were the ones that were basically my nuclear family, in the sense that my mom was often having to work a multitude of minimum wage jobs, whether it was at the gas station, the fields. Meanwhile, my sister cared for me.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for a lot of the opportunities that they helped extend for me, because my mom would always say, the sacrifices vale la pena. It's worth the struggle.
100%. I love that phrase. And where's your mother from?
Mexico, specifically Monterrey.
Okay, and your father as well?
Yes.
Oh, nice, nice. Entonces, we could speak Spanglish in here today.
Claro que sí. I was hoping so.
But David, let's get to right away the big kahuna. Why are you here today? You have something special that you want to announce to the people of Providence, Rhode Island. Let the people know this is major news, major news, exclusive news right here. Talk to the people real quick, David.
I'm excited to announce that I am running for Mayor of Providence to deliver a Providence for all. Because unfortunately, today, Providence is the least affordable city in America for renters. We have watched as costs have skyrocketed, and that's impacted all of our neighbors, but especially our working families that are just being priced out of the city. Property taxes continue to rise, yet our public schools remain understaffed, and city services have not improved. 4 years ago, Brett Smiley, our current mayor, promised to make Providence the best-run city in America.
Yeah.
But instead, he has illegally underfunded our schools multiple times. He has stood by as striking hospital workers at Butler Hospital and advocates trying to save RIPTA were on the front lines. And he has been silent as ICE continues to terrorize our immigrant neighbors and community members. So much so that his administration was caught on camera collaborating with ICE. And so I say all of that because I know that we can build a Providence that all of our neighbors can afford and where everyone feels cared for. And that's why I'm running for mayor.
How long did you have this decision already made up? Like, when did you decide to, because this is going to change your life forever. Even just running is extremely significant. What made you come to this conclusion that you wanted to do this?
Just watching how much more difficult it's been getting for a lot of our neighbors. The fact that over the last 5 years, I've gotten more and more phone calls from families that are concerned about why their rent just went up more than 20%, whether or not they're going to be able to continue calling Providence home. And it's become a disturbing trend where there seems to be no appetite or a sense of urgency from the current mayor to address any of these issues.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we watch as new housing's being developed, and it's all predominantly luxury studios or one bedrooms that are being priced at $2,500 plus. Clearly, housing that's not designed for us. So I say all that because that is what motivated me to have that sense of knowing that we deserve so much better in our city.
And when did you come to this conclusion? Was it a year ago, a month ago? When did you sit down like, okay, all this is happening. I think I could be the man to change this?
During the summer, following our legislative session.
Okay.
So we're a part-time legislature. We serve from January through June. Over the course of those 6 months, I was actively encouraged by a lot of advocates, but most importantly, community members who were sharing with me, you have a vision that meets the needs of what we need, which is housing that we can afford, having schools that are properly staffed.
Yeah.
There needs to be a challenge to the status quo. And naturally, I was a bit unclear on whether or not I wanted to pursue that path because I've taken my responsibility at the State House very seriously. And I wanted to make sure that I was committed throughout the legislative session, focusing on the issues that I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, also recognizing that if there is a layer of grassroots support that wants to see this change, and I know they're going to have our backs as we begin this movement, then we got to make it happen.
No, yeah, this is people always joke to me like, "Oh, you should run for mayor, run for mayor." I'm like, "No, that's a big task." I think it takes way more work than people realize it completely. Like it's a completely life-changing type of situation. When it comes to now running for mayor, what is your plan going forward? Do you have the already like mindset of marketing plan ready? Are you ready to tackle it full on head on? Are you nervous about this? Like what's the emotions running through you right now?
Oh, it's a range of emotions. Most importantly, I'm excited. I'm excited because we have a platform such as this one where we can talk about the issues that are most important to our city.
Yeah.
And be able to own the narrative that when we talk about housing, we should be discussing the ways that we can stabilize the cost of rent, the ways that we can maintain and control property taxes in a way that aren't going to price people out of our city. Mm-hmm. Schools, more often than not, you tend to hear politicians say, we're going to improve test scores, we're going to improve attendance, but they don't actually talk about the core of the issue, which more often than not is tied back to staffing. Do our young people feel supported when they walk through those doors?
Yeah.
Most of the time, when you have a high school like Mount Pleasant that's over 1,100 students and you only have 2 social workers, the answer is likely to be no. So I'm excited to be able to take on this opportunity to run for mayor because now we have a platform to be able to share these bold ideas and demonstrate to our neighbors that we do not have to settle for the status quo.
Yeah.
The way we run our campaign is going to be one focused on affordability, but also joy.
Yeah.
The joy that, again, we can make local governance and engagement fun.
No, listen, I'll tell you this much. I already know that your outfits are gonna be, standing out everywhere you go because running for mayor and you got very dope, colorful outfits, especially suits, is gonna be things that I feel like people might even, I guess as competition might try to use as a target. What are some of the Are you prepared for? Let's look into the future, right? For those who don't know, I'm aware that you are, for example, a wrestler as well, part-time wrestler. Are you still gonna be doing that throughout the running? Are you gonna quit wrestling? Can you be a wrestler and a mayor? Like how does that work?
Oh man, you gotta give me a little more credit. Not only am I a wrestler,
He has the championship.
I
belt.
am a 3-time Renegade Wrestling Alliance hype champion.
Give him the air horns.
So over the last 3 years, I have been a professional wrestler with the local independent organization, the Renegade Wrestling Alliance. I've been proud to call the RWA home. And make no mistake about it, as a part of this campaign, it's going to require a layer of sacrifice.
Yeah.
I recently left my day job to fully commit to this campaign.
Wow.
As a part of that, I still want to maintain my relationship as a professional wrestler, doing story times with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I don't want that to go away. But I recognize I don't have to scale it back. I'm going to have to scale it back just due to personal capacity. And also, to your point, flags are going to be raised on whether or not one is mature enough to take on the responsibility of being the mayor.
Yeah.
But what I often share is the fact that whether I'm in a wrestling ring, yelling at kids, stirring up emotion, or I'm dressed up as Spider-Man, or coaching T-ball at our local Little League, it's about community engagement.
Yeah.
People want to see that their local government officials are actual humans with interests. So I push back against this idea that my extracurricular involvements are immature. I think it demonstrates a layer of humanity, but beyond that, it demonstrates that one cares. Because a lot of the work that I do outside the State House, I often find to be just as important as advocating for laws or budget items.
Yeah, I'll tell you this much. I mean, you are in the community for sure all the time. You are involved in the community. It's just something that no one can negate about you. You tap in with the youth. You do something that kids love and kids support. So, but I already know that that's something, especially if I were to be running against you, I'll be like, oh, that's kind of like, I guess, marketing weak point. It's like, yo, you can try to make fun of him, etc. Because that's all that is really going to happen here. I feel like a lot of, that's what I'm expecting. I don't know if you have any, because I don't know of anybody else running aside from, I'm assuming Brett Smiley is going to run again for mayor. But do you know of anybody, maybe even viable competitors? Are you getting prepared for that type of idea, or do you think it's going to be kind of like a one man show, you running dolo?
So generally, it's seen as unprecedented to run up against an incumbent mayor. There have been moments where I've been discouraged about taking this challenge on,
Yeah,
and I've been repeatedly told, why don't you wait until 2030 when it's an open seat?
yeah. When he terms out,
But I want to be clear. I'm not doing this for the purposes of a job title. For me, the priority is making sure that we have leadership in our city that actually cares about the fact that our neighbors are being displaced and priced out. We need a mayor that's going to fight to stabilize the cost of rent. We need a mayor that is clear as to how they're going to improve the academic experience for our students and families. And beyond that, someone who's going to stand up and fight and be absolutely clear to the mat that ICE is not welcomed here and that we protect our immigrant neighbors. Yet we haven't seen that. And we cannot afford to have another 4 years of complacency from this administration.
if Mayor Brett Smiley was here right now, looking you in the face, and he said, you have no chance. Like, I got this. What would be your answer to Brett Smiley to let him know as to why you think that you can beat him and you should, or at least be deserving more of the role than him?
We have a message that delivers for the needs of working people. And for that reason, we are going to build support all across the city of Providence. From Broad Street over to the West End, going into the Valley neighborhood in Onlyville, and going into the East Side. We're going to have a message that delivers as to what the working people in our city need. And that is something that cannot be said about this administration.
And you currently, what's the amount of numbers? Let's just break it down, because you definitely got to scale up now. What's the amount of number of votes that you've received? The most amount of numbers of votes that you've received ever that people have voted for you so far?
Yeah, it's a great question, Vic. So I would have to say, when looking at a general election within House District 7, probably about 3,000.
3,000. And for mayor, you would probably need how many?
Like 100,000.
No, my man. It's not that much. It's a local primary.
It's a
14,000.
local primary. You're right. It's 14,000.
But something important to reference
Yeah.
is that our election will be next September 2026.
Yes, next year.
Very important to note that it's in September, not in November. The reason for that is because it's the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, in the state of Rhode Island, but especially in Providence, whoever wins the Democratic primary is usually the ultimate winner for that respective seat. And the reason for that is because we have a lot of people that are registered as Democrats, so you don't usually see a case where there's a competitive election in the general between a Democrat and Republican. And for that reason, it's going to be so important that we have intentional outreach to our community members to be able to inform and share why local politics matters and why the important election isn't necessarily the one in November, and that the only form of government that exists is not just the president. It's not just Trump. This is about local government, because it's the decisions that are made at City Hall and the State House that ultimately have much more of an impact on our day-to-day lives than anything coming out of the White House. And I believe that by building out a broad coalition, especially amongst young people and people of color who generally do not feel like politics speaks to them or that every politician is corrupt, this is our opportunity to run a campaign based on affordability, based on joy, but most importantly, being able to demonstrate that there is hope that we can build a city that everyone can afford.
What would be your response to someone out there young in Providence, Rhode Island, that's never voted for before, and they say, fuck politics, I don't care about politics, but you would want them maybe for their first vote ever to be for you when it comes to when you're now currently running for mayor? What would be your response to them to maybe make them a voter?
We're going to stabilize the cost of your rent and make sure you can continue calling Providence home. And if you yourself have family members or friends that are immigrants, know that Providence is going to be a sanctuary city that takes care of them. And that's why local government matters. And that's why it's important that you participate in the primary election going into September of 2026.
One of the issues that people have right now a lot with Brett Smiley is definitely the price of rent, right? Everyone's complaining about the rent prices, the hiking of also homeowner taxing, all the stuff that's happening with that. What is your actual take on this and your plan going forward with this actual topic?
So my plan is to support the city council to pass their rent stabilization ordinance and thereafter enforce it to make sure that no working person in our community has to worry about their rent increasing by more than 4% on any given year. Naturally, we also have to be able to combat the disturbing trend, which is property management companies coming into our neighborhoods and literally buying out streets. We have seen as property management companies like Strive have come in and bought out a multitude of single-family and multifamily homes. They make minor renovations, and then they displace the residents that used to call that home because naturally they jack up the rents, all for the sake of profit. We're going to put a stop to that. We're going to make sure that it is more difficult for property management companies to try to come in and take over homes and price gouge our neighbors thereafter. When we talk about the cost of living, a lot of this is also tied back to property taxes. We have an unfair and unbalanced tax structure in the city of Providence. We recognize that in order to make the necessary investments in our public schools, we have to raise the revenue to make it happen. But we need to raise the revenue in a much more balanced and fair way. That's why I would propose a fair tax system focused on tax brackets that are centered around the assessed value of a home or a commercial property. I'll put it this way. I don't think a modest single-family home in Silver Lake worth $400,000 should be paying the same tax rate as a mansion worth $2.5 million. And I'll say the same thing for our local commercial businesses, right? La Gran Parada, which is assessed at about $900,000, should not be paying the same tax rate as some of the larger hotels in downtown Prov that are worth well over $10 million.
Yeah. And another issue, which especially in Providence, the people of Providence love their culture. Anything that has Providence attached to it, they're very, very emotional about it. You know, whether it's the citation scandal with John, whether it's the PBD Fest scandal with Smiley making changes to it. Will you do anything, let's say, about PBD Fest? Are you going to change it back to original dating? Are you going to do anything about PBD Fest going forward? Do you have that already as a part of maybe one of your plans?
Absolutely. And I would love to speak specifically with artists, small business owners, and media personalities such as yourself to be able to best determine what shifts we can make to PBD Fest so we can make sure it's fun and accessible for everyone. For starters, I do think that we should maintain closed streets throughout downtown. We need to make sure that PBD Fest is one where everyone has the opportunity to just have access to safe and open streets. Beyond that, we've talked a lot about open containers and safety. I believe that there is a way that we could have open containers within PBD Fest in a way that is safe and responsible for everyone to be able to enjoy.
Yeah.
We could also talk about the duration. PBD Fest went from 3 to 2 days. I think there's a way to go back to 3 days to maximize the level of exposure and help stimulate our local economy by specifically allowing for some of our small business vendors to not have to take on such high fees in order to participate. Beyond that, we need to continue uplifting our local artists, our local talent, and making sure that they're properly compensated for the time and effort that they put forward.
Yeah. I would say also the date. I feel like the date, man, eventually...
You don't like doing September when it gets all rainy?
Yeah, it's too much rain. Like, it's too much rain. September, people are back in school. I feel like if you do it in the middle of summer, at least just not in September, before school starts. Like, let's skip the whole month of September when it comes to PBD Fest. I think it'll be a better turnout. You'll get more people from out the state coming. It just feels...
And there's a way to do it, right? Like, post 4th of July, before school starts.
Yes. I think there's something that would highly help it benefit completely. Because I saw it this year. We saw it rained again right when we ended our segment out there, but it started raining. And then last year it got fully rained out. Right, and I think they didn't technically have PBD Fest on Sunday, but there was rainstorms all over Sunday. So if they had like the PBD Fest on Sunday, it would have been rained out as well.
So y'all heard it here first. Yeah. We're gonna make PBD Fest fun and responsive as to what artists and our community members need.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that I've come to realize the significance of it because it matters to me. But then within the community of Providence, they really do care about PBD Fest. Anything that has the name Providence attached to it, citations, anything that is like a symbolic measure for this city, there's always a lot of controversy surrounding certain decisions around it. And it's because of the backlash that people give it online and social media. And I think it's because people love this city.
And our neighbors aren't asking for much.
Yeah.
It's this idea of joy, being able to have access to public spaces. I've often said that the St. Patrick's Day parade should not be the only time that Smith Street gets shut down. I think the same thing about the Dominican Festival. That shouldn't be the only time where Broad Street is fully activated.
Mhm.
I think that there is a way with leadership that is motivated and excited to work with community for us to facilitate more community programming across the board where we actively close out streets and make outdoor dining more accessible, where we actively encourage small business owners and local artists to be able to do concerts within our neighborhoods in a way that draws community together. Because not everything should also happen just in downtown. I think we need to be very intentional about closing out streets within our neighborhoods the same way they do on Atwells Avenue during the summer when they encourage the restaurants in Federal Hill to do outdoor dining. We need to expand those opportunities all across the board.
An issue that I've been seeing people face directly, and they tell me to my face that it's happening to them. I work with a lot of nonprofits, and a lot of the funding right now during the Trump administration is being cut. Especially, I see it happen even on the education level, right? A lot of the GED programs that currently happen in Providence are not going to be happening next year. A lot of people don't even know this, but these are things that are happening behind the scenes, right? And it's sad to see because I feel like these are significant things that we need. Like we need GED programs. So if you cut the funding for the programming that these actual, nonprofit organizations, et cetera, have, then we have less GED graduates in the state in general. What is something that you can do? Obviously, you're not at a presidential level. Obviously, Trump is going to have the final say-so in something of like that nature. But what is something that you can say, or how will you advocate for maybe people that are getting their funding cut locally and they need that money?
So let's be clear. The city has access to a ton of resources. Large part of it is staff. Staff within city departments that can work hand in hand with our local nonprofits that are specifically serving the needs of our neighbors. Whether those are GED programs or an organization like the House of Kodak or Better Lives Rhode Island that serve our unhoused neighbors. We would have an administration that prioritizes collaboration between city departments and these nonprofits, specifically to apply for grants jointly. We would make sure that we would maximize all the opportunities between private foundations, any potential grants that may still exist at the federal level, and of course the state level, to be able to get as much funding as possible while also recognizing that we as a city have that responsibility to also fill in the gaps as needed. And a lot of this can take the form of unique partnerships. I have often said that if we are serious about making sure that we are taking care of our homeless neighbors, then we should be reaching out in a more proactive manner to Amos House, to Better Lives Rhode Island, to Mathewson Street Church, and say we want to support you to make sure that by the time the winter arrives, we are ready to go with emergency shelter while we work towards the long-term plans of building transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. GED programs, similarly, we can reach out to the Genesis Center and say we're going to jointly apply for grants, but in the meantime, we're going to be able to loan resources, whether that's through the capital of staff or access to city buildings, to make your programs as accessible as possible, while also offering those opportunities to also contract out some of their staff so there is some compensation that's still going forward, regardless of whether or not these organizations are still receiving the same amount of funding that they had before. A lot of this just takes bold leadership that is motivated.
I also feel like an issue that comes to mind. It's all improv, ladies and gentlemen. This is off the top of my head. I also, there's an issue that when it comes to just the stereotypical jokes of the potholes in Providence, right? There's potholes all over the city, and there's a need of fixing these potholes, and I feel like it could be done faster. I think we might have mentioned this to Lorza when we had him on. I think he told me, you could correct me if I'm wrong, David, but this is an issue that might be a governor type of fix. But just to ask you the question directly, what is something that you will do for us if you win mayor when it comes to the pothole situation and the way that the street actually is being taken care of in Providence?
We're going to put forward an infrastructure grant that specifically focuses directly on potholes and cracked sidewalks. Because right now, it is not generally safe for pedestrians, for drivers, for cyclists to get around Providence. And for a city of our size and density, it should be a lot easier to be able to get through the city.
Yeah.
And we have seen too many cases where we have had our neighbors that have, again, been injured as a result of trying to dodge a pothole or this car that itself gets damaged because of how severe the infrastructure has broken down. And for that reason, we need to be very intentional about serving all of our neighborhoods, because I would want to be very clear that if we are put forward a bond that centers just around basic infrastructure, that we're doing it in an equitable way that doesn't just give all of the resources to one zip code in particular. Similarly, though, I believe that this can offer opportunities for young people in Providence to be able to pursue jobs and careers in a way where they're actively supporting the local infrastructure as well. By being able to have these bonds in place and have contracted roles, we can tell young people in Providence, these are opportunities now where you can be an apprentice, where you can get on-the-hands job training to be able to deliver for your neighbors and at the same time keep everyone safer. Because we need to have sidewalks that are accessible to an 8-year-old and are just as accessible to an 80-year-old. A lot of what we are hearing from our neighbors is why I said earlier that city services have not improved. And for a mayor that we have now who claimed that we were going to be the best run city in America, we're still stuck talking about potholes. We're still stuck talking about the fact that trees are overgrowing in the sense that they're lifting up the sidewalks, and we still have an excessive level of mattress dumping, especially within Olneyville in particular. We should have a free mattress recycling program, and a lot of that can be done using the skills of a local talent that puts people to work.
Another issue that comes to mind that I'm going to be interested to see how you tackle when it comes to the idea of police in Providence. The policing in Providence during Brett Smiley faces a lot of backlash. The constant term, they say that he's turning into like a police city. We recently had the chief of police on, and he says that ever since he's been working with the mayor currently, that the rate of crimes have been going down, and that he sees a heightened sense of people even applying to become police in Providence. You've been someone, one of the politicians locally that's been very critical of the police. What is going to be your relationship? Do you think are you worried about your relationship, maybe building a relationship, or what is your current relationship with the police, and what's your take on how Brett Smiley has handled the police in Providence?
So I believe that our Providence police play a critical role to help keep our neighbors safe. But the matter of the fact is we rely on them to provide every service and to address every issue happening within our community. I often think to our neighbors that are struggling with homelessness, substance use disorder, mental health needs. We should not be sending armed police to address those issues. We need to be a lot more intentional about the way that we keep our community safe. And some of that starts with the ways that we are able to diversify our staffing that isn't just reliant on armed police officers. A lot of this can take the form of social workers and case managers that are actively within the corridors as to the areas where we know some of our neighbors are struggling. I often think about Branch Avenue, Kennedy Plaza, Olneyville Square, parts of Cranston Street, parts of Broad Street. We know that that is where homeless encampments start, or where our neighbors might be suffering from substance use disorder. And more often than not, what ends up happening is neighbors tend to feel unsafe. And I will say it right now that I think today, a lot of our neighbors in Providence feel less safe now than they might have years before. And a lot of it has to do with the increase in homelessness. And by being intentional of having a different form to address a lot of these social needs, I think we're going to be doing a much better job to keep our unhoused neighbors safe and get them access to resources than the punitive measures we've seen. Because what Brett Smiley has done is instead send armed police officers to raid over dozens of homeless encampments where they have had their property seized, where some of our homeless neighbors have been criminalized and are often left in a worse position than they were before. I made a reference earlier as well. We had a situation where Providence police were caught on camera collaborating with ICE. I think we need to be very clear that that was a violation of the Community Safety Act. It was a violation of our city's sanctuary city ordinance and status. And so we need a mayor who's going to be very clear and transparent with the community that when there are mistakes within the police department, the city is going to own up to it. It shouldn't have to take protests or constituent concerns or people having to break down and share their stories of trauma as to how they might have been victims of police misconduct in order for there to be accountability. So I would want to be a mayor that is fair to our police department while at the same time being firm that we are going to hold them to a high standard so they're serving our neighbors. And beyond that, making sure that any future hires happening within Providence Police are for Providence residents.
And what's your relationship with them right now? Are you in conversations with the chief of police? Like, what's your relationship, if anything, with the, like, say, Oscar specifically?
Police Chief Perez and I have a very cordial relationship. He always picks up the phone when I give him a call, and I've certainly shared my concerns with him in the past in terms of some of the misconduct that we have seen in recent months revolving some body camera footage that involved a young black man at a party during the 4th of July. So I've certainly shared my concerns with him. He's been openly transparent about the process, which I've always appreciated.
I know Noel had some questions to ask you as well.
Yeah. So, luckily for me, a lot of the questions that I've created are I broke it down into 2 categories: just general questions about Providence that I feel every candidate, when they come here, should answer these questions. Then the other ones, lucky for me, align with the things that you're saying and the policies that you want to push for the city. So I want to start with just you as a general candidate. And I do want this to be clear for anyone watching. These questions are framed in a way for you to defend your views. So if anyone watches it, it's not a reflection of what I think or what this podcast thinks. It's more of an attempt for you to recognize a lot of the controversy around the views that you may pose and a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, and you to be given the opportunity to defend yourself and your views. So let's begin with this. Your political adversaries would label you a socialist who pushes for social welfare programs that enlarges government authority, creating more bureaucratic and financial issues, but does little to actually solve the problems of everyday citizens. What's your response to these critics and their claims that your social welfare programs inflate city budget, your call for higher minimum wage at the State House hurts small businesses, your policy ideas require for the government to raise taxes, your policy ideas encourage poverty, which in turn reduces quality of living and ultimately drives residents out of their communities?
So I believe in a government centered around care and compassion. And a lot of that starts with just taking care of our neighbors that are struggling, whether they are struggling to be able to afford their rent and be able to call Providence home, whether they lack access to medical care, are on the verge of experiencing homelessness. I believe that the government has a responsibility to be able to provide support that is going to allow one to be sustained and taken care of. I myself grew up on a series of different public benefit programs. I was a recipient of Medicaid, a recipient of SNAP. I grew up in a public housing complex. I went to public schools. That safety net allowed for me, my mom, and my sister to be able to get ahead. It prevented us from being in a position where we might have been homeless. It allowed us to make sure that there was food on the table. A lot of these ideas that are centered around care and compassion, unfortunately, often get mixed with rhetoric. Rhetoric such as socialist, extremism, etc., which I think drives away the actual merit as to what we're trying to accomplish. So I often see that language as being distracting. I understand as to why it's used, because more often than not, that's a narrative that's pushed by corporate interests that don't want us to make these investments because they would much rather prioritize profit, even if it comes at the expense of a working person. And that's one of the main reasons, for example, why I support the need to stabilize the cost of rent.
That is a phenomenal segue to my next question. So, that was just so perfect. So, again, I want to make this clear. Just because I'm asking the question, does that mean that
they're not his views, y'all? They're not his views.
Yes, please do not attack me. This is, again, because we always see on the internet, it's back and forth for difference of views.
You're just reading off my Instagram comments at this point.
Honestly, I just know how these people think. So, but it also creates the opportunity for you to explain your ideologies.
Absolutely.
So, Providence is seeing double-digit percentage increases in rental prices, and we're currently being ranked one of the most expensive cities to live in, as we've already stated. You've been vocal on this fact, and as you just suggested, we should incorporate some form of rent stabilization. Now, I know rent stabilization is another word for rent control, and it operates a lot like rent control has operated in other cities. And I understand the reason why we don't call it rent control is because there's a negative stigma around it. My question to you is, what do you say to your critics who highlight that in San Francisco, there was a case study that was done by Stanford in 2019 that found that rent control led to 15% reduction in the city's housing supply as landlords converted units to other uses. It also pushed market rents in the long term. New York City also saw a similar phenomenon, and they saw a lot of the people converting their rent-controlled housing into condos and other type of things. And what we saw was the poor weren't benefiting from rent stabilization or rent control. It was actually much more affluent people who were taking control of these units. How would you respond to those critics? How would you respond to the idea that it affects negatively housing markets? And what would be your argument and solutions to this type of problems?
So I just want to reiterate that we are in a housing emergency. Right now, the average cost of a 2-bedroom apartment in the city of Providence is $2,400. That is out of reach for many working people in our city, where the median household salary is closer to about $65,000. And for that reason, we cannot allow for the status quo to continue. The status quo is allowing for the market to determine what the cost of rent is going to be in a given year. And with the amount of luxury development that has come into the city of Providence, we are watching as the median rent continues to escalate. And for that reason, there needs to be a stabilization of sorts. I think it's important to note that a lot of the rent stabilization measures that have been referenced in historic times were usually decades ago, where the housing market was a lot different. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of where we are today as to where we were years ago, we have gone to a point where there is supply being driven, where we are watching investors wanting to come into our city, especially following the fact that we have upzoned the city. So there is now more density that is allowed than ever before. I do not believe that rent stabilization is going to stop any form of development because developers still want to come into our city. I, for one, actually believe that as a part of even receiving a building permit in the city of Providence, there should be a requirement that all new housing being built have some affordability element. Because otherwise, when we just allow the status quo to continue and fester, we're going to see a lot more families that are being displaced or watching themselves become homeless. And I say this because I've had constituents who have literally been in a position where they have to live in their cars before they can rent a motel and then try to get back on their feet because they were just displaced from their last apartment that jacked their rent up over $400.
All right. So moving on to my next question. This one is also, so this is in regards to the idea of paying the fair share. You were vocal about this idea that people should be paying their fair share. You talked about increasing rents on the mansions, the hotels. The city of Providence currently hands out what is called a tax stabilization agreement. We call it a TSA. For those who are watching, this is a tax break over a set period of time. It can be 5 to 30 years that incentivizes developers to come into Rhode Island and build in Providence. You've been vocal in your disagreement with the current TSA system. You're even seen on TV debating against the current mayor's TSA proposals in the State House, saying that they are not justified and that they're ludicrous in the sense that they're giving tax breaks to individuals who are not incorporating affordable housing in the units that they're building. So they're getting these tax breaks, millions of dollars worth of tax breaks, but they're not actually giving back to the community by building affordable housing. They're just building these large, expensive luxury units. Can you explain why you're against it? And what would be your alternative to the current TSA system that we have now?
So I have this radical idea where I believe large developers should pay taxes the same way that a working family does on their home. Unfortunately, what often happens is these become situations where money and politics influences decisions that are made. More often than not, developers that are applying for a TSA will donate generous amounts to city leaders, including the mayor's office. This past year, Mayor Brett Smiley was pushing for a state law that would grant a 30-year tax break for the conversion of any commercial property that shifted into being residential property, regardless of whether there was any affordable units included. So imagine that, a 30-year tax break where they only had to pay about 8% of property taxes because they were able to convert a commercial building into residential. And that was all happening during the same time that the purchase went through for Atlantic Mills. And there was a lot of concern from artist tenants and small business vendors within Atlantic Mills, sharing that they were concerned that their commercial units were going to be converted into luxury condos or luxury apartments. Come to find out, that same property owner that came in and bought out Atlantic Mills and was pushing for this new law maxed out contributions to the mayor. He donated thousands of dollars to the mayor. I think a lot of these issues are connected. City leaders try to justify bad deals, despite the fact that a lot of the reason as to why these bad deals are going through is because there are special interests involved, campaign contributions that harm our system and harm the people that we're supposed to serve.
So my response to this question, to your response is this. I understand what you're saying, but there is a response to this type of argument that says, if you do not give a tax stabilization, people are not going to build here because it costs too much to build in Providence. The way that we value properties and the way that property value is increasing, it's just does not coexist with the type of demand and revenue that these buildings would bring in. I remember someone once said, you pay New York prices to build in Providence, but you get Maine business and Maine revenue. So what is your response to this idea that tax stabilizations are fundamentally necessary for people to even come here and invest in the city?
I believe we have to be a lot more thoughtful about the development that does come to our city. I think one of the strengths from the office of the mayor could be what I call, quote unquote, soft power. The way that you're able to influence developers and businesses to come and invest in our city. And for better or for worse, Mayor Buddy Cianci was well known for that, exercising soft power, being able to drive interest as to why there should be investments into creative capital. And that is what I want to be able to pursue as mayor, is to be an ambassador for our city, to demonstrate that it is worthwhile to invest. And if there is a proposal being put forward as to how it can be easier for there to be development in our city, whether that's waiving permit fees, whether that is providing variances for zoning, I also believe that there should be an element known as community benefit agreements. We can waive the zoning fee. We can waive the building permit fees as needed, but there's going to be an expectation that whatever is being developed is going to serve our neighbors. For example, if there's a new development of commercial space, how about we require some of that commercial space to be designated specifically for local artists? How about we designate some of the housing that's being built to be below market value, specifically designed for working families in our community? Because what we are seeing in front of us right now is not sustainable. It is not sustainable to continue building apartment complexes that house studios and one-bedroom apartments going for over $2,200. So as mayor, I would want to be involved as it relates to the negotiation of some of these developments and always be absolutely clear and be 10 toes down that any decision or development coming to our city has to be in the interest of the working people in our city.
So this leads right into my other question. We're talking about fair share and people paying their fair share. A 2002 report concluded that nonprofits own about 39.3% of land parcels in Providence, with approximately 28% of that 39.3 being owned by the largest nonprofit institutions based in the city. Currently, we are losing $130 million a year in these tax exemptions. This is despite the fact that in 2023, with the help of Brett Smiley's office and administration, we were able to secure $220 million for the next 20 years through the state pilot program from large profits like Rhode Island Hospital / Brown, Providence College, RISD, etc. Mayor Brett Smiley assisted in brokering this deal, as I've already said, and he's very proud of it. Do you believe, as a citizen, was this an equitable deal for the city and its residents? As mayor, what would you have done differently in handling this issue, and how do you handle making sure that these nonprofits pay their fair share?
The agreement that we have with our private universities is absolutely unfair to the working people in our city. Right now, Brown University, Providence College, RISD, and Johnson & Wales are paying roughly 8% of what they would otherwise pay in property taxes. In other words, they're getting a 90% discount on their property taxes, despite the fact that they own over 30% of the land in our city. That is not sustainable. And the most frustrating part is not only the fact that the mayor entered such an underwhelming agreement, but he didn't even bother to include the city council as a part of the agreement when negotiating it. Instead, he negotiated the deal from his office with the universities, some of which are campaign donors, and then thereafter said, this is the agreement we came to, the city council, take it or leave it. Otherwise, you're leaving money on the table. My approach would be one of collaboration, to collaborate directly with the city council, to be able to recognize that, hey, if you are a city council member in Elmhurst, right where Providence College is, let's talk through what your expectations are as to how PC can better contribute to your local community instead of displacing your neighbors. At the same time, where we are right now is an agreement that has been reached, an agreement that has been taken into effect and will persist for years to come, and has even allowed for the universities to continue to grow. And even as they grow, there's not going to be an expectation that they're going to pay more. So as mayor, I would look towards amending the deal that we have with our private universities and be very firm that the community finds it unfair that their property taxes have to go up each and every single time we're being asked to raise revenue, as opposed to being able to look at the large and wealthy landowners and demanding that they contribute more.
So I love like the criticism towards this whole situation, because I'm actually in agreement with this, and I'll admit that. I don't agree with this idea that the nonprofit should own almost 50% of the city and not pay, their fair share. But my issue is this: legally, we can't truly tax them, especially Brown, because their charter exists before Rhode Island became, a recognized state in the union. So how are you legally going to go about having them pay their fair share? I've heard a bunch of different things, having them compensate by them doing city services and filling in gaps like that. Brown has a police force, having them police instead of us sending police officers over there, things like that. Like, what are your suggestions for ways for us to have them pay their fair share if we legally cannot force them to do so?
So there are actually a multitude of ways that we could require our private universities to pay their fair share directly back to our city. One of which, as referenced earlier, is amending the current pilot agreement that we have. Reality is we have a lot of community members that are frustrated and outraged that each and every single time the city has to raise revenue, it's coming off of their backs, yet and still private universities are only paying about 8% of what they would otherwise pay in property taxes. I believe very strongly in community organizing. As mayor, I would host community forums. I would apply public pressure to make it absolutely clear that what is happening here as it relates to the distribution of wealth, as it relates to the disproportionate level of taxes that are paid between a working person and private universities, is not right. We would have forums, we would talk openly and transparently as to how we would amend this agreement, and if need be, go to the state legislature to enable an endowment tax. In my years as a state representative, I have repeatedly introduced what is known as the endowment tax, which would tax about 2% of any university endowment worth over $1 billion, with the expectation that any of the money generated would go directly back into our Providence schools.
Can you just explain what an endowment is?
Absolutely. So an endowment is essentially a savings and investment fund within a private university, in addition to public universities as well. And Brown, for example, has an endowment that is worth over $6 billion. I want to emphasize that that is billion with a B. So even by being able to tax at least 2% of that endowment, we are generating hundreds of millions of dollars for our city in a way that the funding would be used that would directly support our students. So I think a lot of this has to do with what is the responsibility. From a legal standpoint, we could pursue an endowment tax. From the organizing standpoint, directly coming from the mayor's office, it looks like amending the current pilot agreement. And again, reaching a fair agreement with the universities and being able to tell them we are using these funds not for the purposes of funding general operation expenses in the city, but instead we're actively using them to support the needs of our Providence Public School students. Because it is outrageous that we have an Ivy League institution just 2 miles away from an under-resourced high school.
Okay. We're almost done. I'm so sorry, Honorable Representative. I do apologize. I ask a lot of questions.
You just called me honorable.
Yeah. Well, that is your title.
Well, we out here, man. Damn.
Almost called him Minister Farrakhan real quick.
You could arrest us too. That's the crazy part. He has a badge. No, it's the craziest thing in the world. God bless. Yeah, no, Pedro tried to arrest me a couple times. So this is my next question. So you talked about education, the importance of education. Providence Public Schools has been taken over by the state in 2018 and continues to be taken over due to their educational outcomes. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me restart this question. I read this wrong. So Providence Public Schools have been taken over by the state. This began in 2018 to turn around educational outcomes after a Johns Hopkins University report revealed that Providence public education system was one of the worst in the country, with some of the lowest outcomes across the board. Since the takeover, we've seen improvements. However, proficiency level in math, reading, and writing is still below the national and state average. And absenteeism is still 8 percentage points over the state average. As a member of this community, how do you believe the current administration has handled this issue? Do you agree with the mayor's efforts to incorporate charter schools to deal with this problem? And this is an even This is an even more important question because there are members of this community who do like charter schools and they send their kids to charter schools, especially in South Providence. A lot of people love, for example, Highland or San Miguel. So, do you think it's fair to go against charter school system, which is one of the special interest groups being the teacher unions have been against for so many years? Do you think it's fair to take that option away from parents to satisfy these teacher unions? And as mayor, what would you do differently? How would you handle this situation, all the conflicting special interests that are involved?
My man just threw 4 SAT questions at me at once. So I'm going to take it one at a time. Just to kick it off, I think the current administration has been failing our schools in the sense that they illegally, under Mayor Brett Smiley, our Providence public schools have illegally been underfunded twice. So much so that the courts had to step in and intervene and demand that stop. And that's one of the main reasons we saw an instant hike in property taxes this past year. I do not trust this administration to responsibly be prepared to take back the transition of our local schools, because clearly there is a vision that is lacking. My vision for our schools is to make the meaningful investments that are needed, but specifically making sure that those investments are going towards the needs of staffing. There was a reference made earlier to the underwhelming academic performance of our students, the absenteeism rates, and a lot of this can be tied back to whether or not the support exists in the schools for our young people. Nearly 40% of our students are multilingual learners, otherwise known as English language learners. Yet we don't have a sufficient number of bilingual and multilingual educators that are prepared to communicate and support our students. Being a teenager is tough. Going to middle school is tough. Now imagine all of that combined with the social climate that exists today and the rampant doom scrolling that exists. I find it outrageous that many of our schools do not have behavioral specialists, only have 1 to 2 guidance counselors for an upwards of 500 plus students. That's unacceptable. We need to be very clear that when Providence Public Schools transition back to local control, that there is going to be collaboration between the mayor's office, between Providence Public School District, and the school board to develop a budget that meets the real needs of our students. And that's going to start with making sure we have safely staffed schools all across the board from elementary, middle school to high school. Because we should not be having cases where we have a high school, again, like Mount Pleasant, over 1,100 students, yet they only have 2 social workers, no culture coordinator. During the height of COVID, there were COVID funds that existed, emergency ESSER funds, that were used to invest in culture coordinators that would communicate with families. We had more social workers, and once those funds expired, there was no fight from the city to restore funding. Instead, those essential frontline workers that supported students with social and emotional needs were laid off. I want to be absolutely clear that under my administration, under our budget, we would prioritize social and emotional health and gain more multilingual educators into our schools, because that is the only way that we're going to be able to meet the basic needs of our students and our families before they feel welcomed into our schools and feel prepared to learn. Now, in terms of the question about charter schools, I think it's very important to make a distinction between large big box charter schools such as Achievement First and Excel Academy and our independent charter schools that have very niche support systems for our students, such as Nuestro Mundo, such as San Miguel, such as Charette. Those charter schools that are the independent standing ones, I believe, do a very effective job of supporting our students. The Nuestro Mundo model of being able to provide dual language academic support for our students goes such a long way to help out our diverse students that are multilingual learners and those that are newly arrived from another country. Those are the types of charter schools that we need to invest in so our immigrant families feel supported. We need to make sure that those are the types of schools that we are actively lending a hand and letting them know that they have a home within Providence Public School District. As for the big box charter schools, I'm very concerned as to some of the agendas that are pushed forward by charter management organizations. I worked as a behavioral specialist at Achievement First Mayoral Academy on Hartford. And I remember being in a staff meeting where they told us that a funder had a new curriculum that they wanted us to test out. And I found that outrageous. I was working at a public school, and I was being told that a funder was recommending that we apply a new curriculum and a new teaching model with the expectation that teachers would then report back to see how it worked. In other words, I felt like our students were being treated as guinea pigs. And I believe that more often than not, we need to be very thoughtful as to what investments are being made into our schools. And every time we have a big box charter that has ample private resources and funding, they're able to come on in, be able to present this idea and the facade that they're going to be able to provide more resources to our students. And then thereafter, our public schools are left with even less funding. They're left with less funding in a way that impacts operational expenses, impacts whether or not special needs student is going to get the support that they need. So it is a very nuanced topic, and it's important to make the distinction. I find it unfortunate that we often get labeled as being pro or anti-charter. Again, I think there is room for our single, independent standing charter schools.
I'm glad that you answered it this way because I understand that there are for-profit charter schools and that a lot of those institutions exist in a way that is just unethical, like you just mentioned. But it's not very different from the models that are in public education, because this is where I get a little frustrated, and this is where I never get an answer. How do we divert away, you as mayor specifically, how do you plan to divert away from this norm of, a lot of the funding that's going into education being used to fund these standardized examinations and funding these large corporations that are making money out of these standardized examinations? And then on top of that, you have the problem of, and Gina even said this. This is what shocked me. Like Governor Raimondo, when she was in office, she made this a whole thing. She's like, why would I give Providence Public Schools more money if they have such large funding and a majority of it is going to administration fees? Yep. It's not actually going to the education of the students. It's going to the administration. So, but then you hear that and you see that the teachers are also not getting paid. The teachers are saying they're underpaid. I'm seeing that they're underpaid. So, and it's to a point where they don't want to teach. We're losing teachers. We have we have a teaching crisis, especially in this country and in the state. How do you tackle this issue as a mayor? How do you make sure that money is not going to these large corporations? How do you make sure that the money is not solely going, or a majority of it is going to administration? It's actually going to teaching our students and properly paying our educators so we can have the best educators available.
So I'm glad you say that, Noel, because we have an issue within Providence Public Schools where there is bloat within central office. Since the start of the state takeover, we have seen a growth within administrators working out of central office. Yet and still, we have over 70 plus vacancies all across the school district. And that becomes a question of priorities. It was inappropriate that there was a $7 million plus consultancy contract with an out-of-state vendor that was contracted through PPSD with the expectation that they would provide professional development to teachers. That was $7 million that we could have used to fund and staff behavioral specialists, guidance counselors, and social workers into our schools. So to the point being made around public education and the spending, unfortunately, it is not as directed and intentional as it should be, because there is certainly a lot of money to be made in education. And this is why I think it's going to be important that we have a mayor with a very clear vision. I am here telling the working families in our city that as mayor, I'm going to ensure that I'm working with the school district, I'm working with the school board to guarantee better staffing in all of our schools, especially in middle school, where we tend to feel a lot of youth that get disconnected from academics, they get disconnected socially and emotionally, and that has such irreparable harm. It has harm on their mental health, on their confidence, on their academic performance, and it's hard to recover from that. And so by looking at the $140 million that Providence allocates to PPSD, I want to be very, very concentrated as to how those funds are invested And unfortunately, I think we've had an administration that's been relatively disconnected from that process.
All right. This is my final question. It's my doomsday question. So shout out to Sam Zurier. Well, Senator Sarah Zurier.
I never thought I'd hear that on the Club Ambition podcast. I'm just going to say that one time for the one time. Shout out to Senator Sam Zurier.
Shout out to Senator.
Did not think that was going to be said.
Yeah, shout out to Senator Sam Zurier. He has been screaming this doomsday scenario since he was in city council for Providence. Currently, the city of Providence has a pension liability. So for those who don't know, the pension liability is essentially the city of Providence has city workers who retired, and they have been guaranteed a pension. This pension was agreed upon by Mayor Buddy Cianci. And it was an agreement that said that a percentage of how much they were making their last 3 years, an aggregate of their last 3 years would be what they'd be paid. I believe it's like 70%, something like that for the pension plan. And the city of Providence has to pay that out until these people pass away. The liability has totaled to over $1 billion, and it is currently underfunded. We currently have only funded less than 30% of it. That means we owe over $1 billion of it. We've only paid close to 30% of it. The city's annual payment to its pension system is forecast to reach $120 million by fiscal year 2027, which would eat up 21% of the city's general fund revenue if nothing is done. The contribution is expected to swell to $230 million by fiscal year 2040, according to a January 2022 report. Mm-hmm. This would be larger. If this was to actually happen, our pension budget would be larger than our education budget. It'd be larger than the budget we spend on the police. It would be a fiscal catastrophe that will lead the city into bankruptcy. Mayors in the past have struggled with this problem. Mayor Lors attempted to privatize the water as a way to fund the pension system. He also attempted to take out money, to borrow money through bonds. People fought against that and said we shouldn't do it. This is also an issue that Mayor Tavares dealt with. He decided to shut down schools, fire teachers as part of the way to deal with this problem. Mayor Brett Smiley currently says this is not a problem that he believes exists as seriously as people believe it to be. And he thinks it's something that is not something we should be focusing on right now. But people like Senator Zurier have made it very clear that if this problem does not find a solution within the next few years, we will see a bankruptcy option on the table for the city of Providence. As mayor, how would you tackle this issue for the future children and residents of this city?
So you described the financial figures perfectly, Noel. This is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. The expectation that we would be spending over $200 million in taxpayer funds to be able to pay for this pension package by 2040 is not acceptable. Those amounts are based on the expectation that we are going to fully pay these pension payments by 2040. I do not believe that we should be asking the taxpayers in the city of Providence for additional funding and revenue needs each and every single year in order to meet the full payments by 2040. So I'll be openly transparent. I don't think we need to meet the full payments by 2040. There is no requirement legally for us to meet those full payments by 2040. In the meantime, what we need to do is we need to be able to negotiate with those who are retired and live out of state. There is something to be said about someone who is collecting a pension check from the city of Providence that resides out in Florida. Collectively, we need to get the retirees that are out of state into an agreement where there is an expectation that they will be receiving less than the generous pensions that they were promised from Mayor Cianci. Because unfortunately, a lot of those were political favors that have ended up hurting the working people and families of our city, because there's this expectation that a decent chunk of our revenue generated each and every single year from the taxpayer has to go to this pension fund.
So this is my rebuttal question. And you can, yes or no. Would you privatize the pension plan the same way the state has, which is something Brett Smiley actually pushed when he was the chief of staff under Gina Raimondo?
So it would make no difference, according to the state, whether or not we privatized it. I would have to look more into the details.
Okay.
But if there was a benefit to the extent that the Providence taxpayer wouldn't have to incur the expectation that they have to pay more and more to the pension fund every year as a part of their taxes, and I would say yes. But at this time, the state has said that it would not make a difference at all.
If it came down to it, would you bankrupt the city? Because this is something I've actually asked your colleagues as well on the city council, not your colleagues on the city council, but the kitty councilman. I've asked, would you bankrupt the city? I've actually heard a lot of people say, Yeah, because there's actually benefits to bankruptcy when you're talking about restructuring debt and contracts and stuff like that.
No, we
Okay.
certainly wouldn't bankrupt the city.
Okay.
Because that is going to lead to layers of divestment all across the board. It has ripple effects. It impacts communities. And a lot of that is going to lead to job loss. A lot of that is going to lead to a situation where Providence is not going to have the resources, the revenue to be able to provide for our schools, to be able to provide for basic services like trash collection. Turning to bankruptcy would be a terrible idea. And that is why I've emphasized the need for the mayor to be able to step in and negotiate with those retired pensioner recipients that live out of state and be able to come to an agreement where they will be receiving less, while at the same time being able to recognize that the expectation that we're supposed to contribute of an upwards of $200 million in general taxpayer funds by 2040 is not rooted in any reality aside from this goal that was put forward by the city through a report. I think it's our responsibility to be able to look back at those numbers and be able to know that there are different approaches.
And this is actually my last question, but it's not even a policy question. It's more of a political question. What would you say to people in the Democratic Party who are saying your decision to run is against the Democratic Party, their interests, especially in a time when Republicans are galvanizing people, they're organizing, and they're standing in unity with one another? Many Democrats could see this as you trying to divide the party in a moment where we should be standing in unity with those who are already elected in office.
The status quo cannot continue. We cannot allow for our neighbors to continuously find themselves in a position where they are being priced out of the city that they love because the cost of housing is too high, or because they are continuously watching as their taxes increase while services remain the same and our schools are understaffed. We need a change in Providence. Working people in our city recognize that they deserve better. Our immigrant communities know that they should feel protected, not be forced to live in fear in Providence. And that's the message that I'm running on. It is a message I believe in, I am ready to advocate and to fight for, because Providence needs a fighter.
Did you think about running independently at all, or no? Was that ever in question with you?
No, because of the fact that we have a two-party system structure, both at the national level, but especially here locally, where generally speaking, it's really just the Democratic primary that allows someone to be able to take office. And to that case, I'll share, that's one of the reasons why we have some relatively conservative Democrats that would otherwise be Republicans in other states, but they know that by running as Democrats, that's the only way that they'll be able to be in office.
Yeah. And some quick hit questions. Who do you think was the best mayor of Providence of all time? You're running for mayor of Providence. I'm familiar with, obviously, the legendary name of Buddy Cianci, David Cicilline. We have Angel Taveras.
Yeah.
Angel
First Dominican
Taveras.
Spanish mayor.
Currently Brett Smiley. Who would you say was the best mayor that Providence has ever had in history, in your opinion?
So based on a lot of historic context and research, I would have to say Mayor Cicilline did a lot, especially following the indictment of Mayor Cianci, to be able to bring back hope into our city with the idea that not all politicians are corrupt. Not all politicians are shady. There are those that are here to serve the public, because at the end of the day, being in government is to provide a public service. And I think with some of the investments that Mayor Cicilline put forward, some of the bold proposals to get the universities to pay their fair share through the means of a pilot agreement, that went a very long way to setting up a foundation for us to be able to advocate further and talk about the need to fund basic services and having an expectation that private universities have a responsibility to do so.
The mall, the Providence Place Mall is being sold. Are you for the Providence Place Mall remaining a mall, or do you want it to become a loft? People are saying they should turn it into a water park. We should make it the new Gillette Stadium. A lot of jokes, a lot of rumors. What's your take on the Providence Place Mall?
So the Providence Place Mall will have a new owner, and as a part of that, once it goes for sale and there is an agreement being made with the new owner, I would love to have community be involved as a part of the process as to how the mall can further transform. You and I competed on a ratings war a while ago where we both put out videos around the same time talking about what should the future of the mall be.
Yeah.
He won the ratings war, by the way. I only got like 600 likes. I think you like scaled up to like 2,000. But I say that because of the fact that it's an exciting time to be able to note that one of our strong institutions right here in the city, the Providence Place Mall, has the potential to serve as more of a community space. It could be curated to have art galleries, to be able to have small businesses that are able to lease some of these units at discounted rates. The Providence Place Mall, unlike other malls in this country, is actually popping in the sense that people actively go and shop. People enjoy the entertainment that's provided through the movie theater, through Dave & Buster's, through some of the new arcades that they have. I think that the Providence Place Mall is one that is certainly going to see transformation in the future. I don't think it's necessarily going to result in some of the commercial space being converted into housing per se, but I would love to see more small businesses get an opportunity to have brick and mortar space right there at the mall.
And my final question, what is your reaction? Timely, we just have major news that happened this week. Some of the most wild political news in history this week. A live assassination happened on the University of Utah Valley University campus. Charlie Kirk, a very controversial, a right-wing activist, a debater, podcaster, probably the top one. You know, many can debate if he's the top one amongst his own peer group, right? You have him, maybe would we say
Ben
Ben
Shapiro, Steven
Crowder. But I would say in recent times, Charlie Kirk's influence is extremely high,
Yeah.
right? And he was assassinated live in front of thousands of people, in front of the world, because cameras were recorded and captured it. They just captured Tyler Robinson, I believe.
That snitched.
The 22-year-old that was the shooter, right? The father brought him into the authorities. This just happened. Breaking news, basically. We have you in the studio. You're running for mayor of Providence. What's your reaction to this that just happened?
The murder was so damn scary. And it was unacceptable. Because as much as I disagreed with Charlie Kirk, specifically as it relates to his comments towards women, our black community, and our immigrant neighbors, no one should be assassinated for practicing their First Right Amendment of freedom of speech. I think it's a show of the times in terms of where we are and how emboldened certain people within our community feel. That aside from just having political disagreements, there is a sense that is being felt that violence is necessary, which I do not believe. Earlier this year, we saw the Speaker of the House from Minnesota murdered alongside her husband. It's a scary time in terms of the quote-unquote political divide that exists. And it's really upsetting to watch it unfold in real time because we are living through a very historic moment that shouldn't be defined by murder. And to that end, I think we have a responsibility within government for more reason to be able to demonstrate to our communities that government should be a forum where we can come and disagree and have debate with the expectation that we're going to work towards the best outcome possible for everyone.
Yeah. No, it's a wild time. I'm still like processing all of that happening. Like it's a pretty crazy time right now. Also, last question. Brett Smiley received a lot of backlash when he went on a trip to Israel. What is your take on the war between Israel and Palestine, everything that's going on, the Gaza conflict? What is your take on this? Because this is a topic that in Providence, there's constant protests. Locally, people are very passionate about this, right? So I would imagine if they see someone running for mayor, they want to know their take on it, even though it's not necessarily a local issue, but it's still, we have Palestinians, we have a Jewish community here, strong communities of all kinds. It's a melting pot here. So something of this nature, I think people want to hear. What's your take on this?
I also just want to add to that too. I want this question to be directed to the East Siders. There is a large Jewish population there, and they're one of the strongest voter blocks in this city. So also acknowledging them, what would your response to Vic's question be?
So in my time as a legislator and now as a candidate for mayor of Providence, my priority is always centered around the working people of our city. That said, we cannot turn a blind eye to the genocide that's happening in Gaza. We have had thousands of innocent children and civilians that have been murdered. And as a taxpayer, alongside a lot of other neighbors in our city, I do not believe that our tax dollars should be going towards weapons that are being used to murder innocent people overseas. And I also want to reiterate and re-emphasize that the atrocities happening in Gaza are by no means an excuse or an opportunity for any form of anti-Semitism. Because we have seen anti-Semitism weaponized in response as to what's happening in Gaza, and that is unacceptable. And as mayor, I'm going to make sure that all of our neighbors, our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Jewish brothers and sisters, feel supported and taken care of in Providence.
And there we have it. Dave Morales stopping by the Club Mission podcast, announcing he's running for mayor of Providence. Appreciate you stopping by the studio. Thank you for your visit. Thank you for your time. Also, this is not going to be his only visit. We'd love to have you come again, especially at the height of the campaign, once everything's full steam. Because I'm pretty sure, maybe have a debate. I would love to have a debate between you, Brett Smiley, in the studio. I know Brett Smiley's team is interested in coming on soon. I think that'd be pretty interesting. And anyone else who's going to be announcing that they're running, they're more than welcome to reach out and we can have them on the platform, have a conversation. But thank you.
So y'all heard it here first, y'all. Any politicos, just know this is the media station to be on. It is an absolute honor, Vic. Noel, thank you both so much for the opportunity. Yeah. There is no other place I would have loved to have announced my campaign for mayor of Providence than right here on the Club Ambition podcast, y'all.
Are you gonna beat him? Are you gonna beat Brett Smiley? What's your confidence? If you had to give a percentage, you think you got this?
When you have a message that delivers for the needs of working people, the working people are going to deliver for you. So I feel very confident that moving forward, we're going to have new leadership at City Hall.
You heard it from Mr. Morales aquí here at Club Ambition Podcast. Appreciate you all from Rhode Island to the world. Be smooth.
She got that ambition, baby. Look at her drive. I always just want to do that.
And that was a clip from our podcast, the Club Ambition Podcast. Cap, if you're looking to watch the full episode, make sure to go check it out right now. It's available on audio and also on YouTube.